webinar, so there'll be a copy of it for everybody that's in the mastermind group to have access to this. So if you guys have questions along the way, I will have the chat box pulled up and for you guys to ask any questions along the way, and I'll do my best to answer those as we go along. So this here is a series of questions that were asked. Some of these were questions that were emailed in and submitted to me. Other of these questions were stuff that's been posted on our mastermind group over the last month or so. And so we're just going to run through some of those questions, and hopefully they provide some clarity. It's kind of a wide variety of topics. So before we do that, before we dive into this first question, just so you guys know, there are a handful of people that are on this webinar that are not part of our mastermind group, and so just to let you know, what our group is, and you could call it an online coaching group or an online mastermind / peer group, and it's basically a place where we learn as business owners in our industry. So most everybody in our group, we have about 150 to 160 members that most all of them are owners of companies in the industry. Everybody's, as a general rule, is hovering in that maybe $700-800K a year on up to $8-10 million a year revenue range. And so it's a place to connect. There's an online forum. There's tons of video content that's going out, and we host some workshops and do some other things. So if you have any interest in that, feel free to reach out to me after this webinar. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. So, all right, let's dive into this first question that was raised by one of our group members out in California. He says, our sales rep recently asked for a base salary increase. How can we know if that base salary is too high and undercuts motivation? And what should the salary commission balance be? So this is a really good question that can be tackled from a couple different angles. So let me just talk maybe broadly about my philosophy behind how I would think about that commission / base salary for a salesperson. So I have seen some people keep the base salary so low, and they have a decent commission on the back end, but the base salary is so low that often what they end up doing is attracting not a great kind of candidate for that role. So I mean, people that have like a base salary in the $30,000 to $35,000 range, it's likely not going to attract the right kind of candidate, and so they end up getting subpar salespeople. And because the really low pay with commission, the low salary with commission, is something that's pretty common with things like car sales and insurance sales and that sort of thing, where it's really heavily incentive or commission based. And there is a sense in where I'm okay with that depending on the kind of sale, but the sort of sales we have in our industry is a bit of a longer sales cycle. And so whereas a car, I mean, you could, from start to finish, you could close a deal in a day or 2 days, even a few hours. In our industry, it could take a year or 2 or 3 years to be able to land some of the kinds of jobs that we want to land. And so I want somebody to be able to feel good about working the system, and doing the plowing and the sowing of those relationships, and being okay with not closing a deal for 2 or 3 years. And I want them to be hungry to close that deal, but I want them to be okay to not pressure or go after lower hanging fruit that's maybe not as good. So what happens sometimes, this has happened with us too, is if we set the base salary so low and the commission a bit more aggressive, what will end up happening is they end up going after jobs that are not as ideal for us in order to get that quicker commission, because there's a financial need on their end. So in my mind, what I like to think, and everything's going to vary from area to area, because what salaries look like in Kentucky, where I'm at, is going to be different than what they look like in New York or California or Texas or wherever. So I want that base salary to be low enough that someone's aggressive and wants to really kill it, but I also want it to be high enough that they're not stressed month to month, that they're not going to be able to make ends meet. So in our neck of the woods, that's going to be in the 50 to 60K range with, 30 to 40, maybe up to $50,000 in potential sales commission. So it's almost kind of like I don't know, maybe like a 60-40. And so I think anywhere in that 60-40, 70-30, so base salary being 60, somewhere between 60 and 70, and commission being 30 is probably a good sweet spot in our industry, particularly if you're going after larger jobs. And so you guys have seen our commission structure in the past, and often what we'll do is we make commission really sweet, but only for certain kinds of accounts. So only for accounts that are of a certain size. And commission checks could be $10, $15, $20,000 depending on the quality of the account that's brought in. But we know we're not going to get a whole lot of those in a given year. And so that's the way that we've structured that. I'd be happy to talk a bit more in depth with anybody if they want to about this particular question, because it's kind of a case by case basis, looking at the performance and the type of person that you have. So yeah, that's probably the way that I would process this. Okay, next question is, how do you manage supplies resale, order, delivery, and stocking? Is there a dedicated person, or do the managers handle this? So another good question. So the way that we currently do this now is our managers are responsible from start to finish. So from the very front end to the very back end of making this happen, our managers are the ones responsible. And so they're out in the field on the job sites. They're interacting with the customer. They're in the janitor's closets. They know what's there and what's not there, and they're the right person to be able to know what is needed. And so what we have a agreement with NSA, or we're an NSA member, and so we have certain pricing that we get through our vendors, and we work through this, I don't know, you call it like a third party supply chain company called Network, that has a web portal that our managers use where they can log in and order supplies for various job sites. And one of the things that we do is we limit what they can order. So we set the parameters in their portal so that, for instance, they can only order, a certain kind of toilet paper, or a couple different varieties, or whatever we have for the job sites that they have. And so in terms of chemicals or disposable supplies that they're able to order, it's pretty limited. So they're the ones that are responsible for this. And then you think about on the back end, we're looking at supply costs on a job to job basis. And so there's a lag indicator or a check on the back end of what this looks like. And so the last piece of this is that the supply on our end, because of the size that we're at, we have our supplier drop ship everything. So we don't actually have a person that's going out and making deliveries. That's going to be pretty common. Once you get to a certain volume with a certain supplier, you're going to be able to have a little more leverage to get your supplies drop shipped. So if you're at a spot where that's not possible, you're probably going to have like a minimum order size in order for them to drop ship for you. So you'd want to maybe save up before you order at a location. You could possibly have your managers deliver some of those supplies if it's pretty minimal. And you could run the numbers to see if having a delivery person is going to be a cost-effective way for you to do it. Again, ideally, you're getting drop ship from your supplier, but managers are in the mix, handling the ordering, making sure it gets dropped, and that the stuff that's there is what is supposed to be there and is needed. So this one's not easy. As you grow, this will likely change in your organization. So just I would be anticipating that to not always look the same, but continue to move more and more to a streamlined model. And one of the ways I would think about this is that you want your company to always be in a spot that it's scalable, so that whatever you're doing now can grow maybe within your own market or into a new market. So if your supply, ordering, and delivery process is pretty labor intensive and takes a lot of oversight and would be difficult to apply somewhere else, it's probably not a good model for you. You need to switch to something that's going to be a bit more scalable so that it can grow, that process can grow as you grow as a company. Let's see. Oh, good question. About somebody asked about what do we do about like rags, mop heads, that sort of thing. So that is something that managers will bring back, and at the different locations we have our own, laundry equipment, and we usually pay somebody to do laundry, and then the managers will take those back out to the locations that they're in. So they're in all their buildings, and so that's something that we handle. I do know some companies that have that outsourced to a vendor to take care of that for them. We haven't found that to be cost effective for us, and so we handle that stuff in house, and the managers are responsible for the delivery and the laundering of that stuff. Okay, next question is, how do we price post-construction cleaning jobs? So this is definitely not an easy one to answer. So I have spent, literally since I started my career right after college, I have been involved in bidding and estimating like from the get-go. So I started out pricing large construction projects, and then doing janitorial bids and estimates. I've done remodeling work, and done some other like online marketing stuff where I've had to put proposals together for people. And the bidding process really for anything you do is pretty similar in that you've got to figure out the scope of work to be done, the time that it's going to take you to do that work, and then the corresponding expenses that are associated with getting that work done. So any materials and supplies and that sort of thing. So in some senses, post-construction cleanup is really similar to that, in that you've got to figure out, okay, what are the tasks that need to be done, and the facility that needs to be done in, and what sort of time is that going to take me, and what sort of materials is it going to take. The tricky part with post-construction is there's so many variables, and lots of contractors are different, and so what's required in some projects is just a lot different than others. So it makes this one really difficult to have a cookie cutter approach to it, because there's no standard price per square foot necessarily, because what could be expected of you at one location may be a lot different at another location. So for instance, I've been on a couple of post-construction jobs where we had to apply some, really random sealer to a floor and like 5 coats of it, and it took a long time. I've been to some where you've got all sorts of equipment that has all this plastic on it that has to be peeled off, and it's a super time-consuming process. And then the cleanup after that, some construction sites are going to be a bit cleaner, others are going to have a lot more traffic, it's going to be dirty. We've had other cases where we'll clean, and then other contractors will come in to do their punch list work, and then it's messy again, and we have to clean again. So figuring out what those details are and what that looks like is a good first step. So I found a resource, and I'm gonna post it in the chat here. So there's a website that I came across. I was doing a little bit of research for this, and I'm gonna highlight this, and I'm gonna post it in the chat box here. See if that comes through. Let's see. Okay, that should have came through. So you can see on this page here, this is a company that does construction cleanup, like a lot of it. And they have this pricing sheet or this pricing graphic that talks about the price per square foot that they average on certain kinds of facilities. And what's interesting about it is, for instance, a bank is much more expensive than, let's say, an education facility. And I'm going to assume that in a new bank, there's a lot more detail work that needs to be done. Window work, I'm not really exactly sure what the scope of that is, but I found this to be really helpful just in terms of giving you a rough price per square foot. So I always think it's helpful to have some benchmarks as I'm building out a price. You know, for instance, if you're doing a car dealership, a post-construction cleanup, and your price comes out to be 5 cents a square foot, you're like, well, that's really low. Or if it's $1 a square foot, you think, man, that might be super high compared to what somebody else is doing. So I think this is a good place to go to get some generalized pricing. I was talking to Jeff Carmen, who's bid a few post-construction jobs for us, and you know, he talked about production rates being anywhere between $250 and $500 an hour, or 500 square feet an hour. And again, depending on the work and the density and the mess and all of that kind of stuff. So this one's not easy. It's really, unless you do a lot of post-construction work, it's going to be harder to get time standards on this. I know we have a couple folks in our group that do a lot of this. So James Melton with UGPlay, I know they do a bunch of post-construction work all the time. And I don't know if he'd be happy to talk with anybody about it, but James is a good guy, and he knows his stuff on that. And so I feel like that's about as in-depth as I can get without actually going to and looking at a specific project. All right, let's go back to full screen mode here. Okay, so the next question here is, how many day porters are needed to handle a 300,000 square foot facility with 150 employees when the customer has several random tasks they want done? So this Cassandra sent this question in, and she'd actually, I believe, talked with Jeff Carmen here in our office, who's our VP of Ops and was formerly oversaw all of our business development and sales. And I chatted with him a little bit this morning about that conversation. And similarly to the last question about post-construction cleanup, what's the same sort of process applies here, in that you need to figure out the work to be done and the approximate amount of time to do that work. So we all know, hopefully all of us know on some level, how to bid a cleaning job. We know how long it takes to clean restrooms or offices or break rooms or something of that sort. So when it comes to day porter work, what they do is a little bit different. So it's not the routine cleaning at night. And so one of the things that you'll want to do when trying to figure out how much day porter time is needed is it would basically be something similar kinds of tasks, but with a much more aggressive production rate. So for instance, if day porters are going in and checking restrooms and cleaning restrooms throughout the day, they're likely not doing the thorough kind of cleaning that's going to happen at night. And so whereas a restroom might take 3 minutes per fixture on average to clean, in a day porter scenario, you may be looking at more like 1.5 minutes to clean. So they're not going to be doing a full mop and, you know, a full wipe down of everything. It's more going to be a spot clean, make sure all the toilet paper and paper towels are there. So the restroom is stocked and moderately clean throughout the day. And so that's going to be pretty typical. And the same would go for common areas and break rooms and that sort of thing. So the day porter in many ways is going to be spot checking. Now, as a general rule, most customers, when they ask for a day porter, so if I'm thinking about pricing this to somebody, if I could get roughly in the ballpark, let's say that on this particular facility, I was like, hey, it's going to take somebody about 6 hours probably to do this kind of work. You know, maybe the restrooms have to be gone over twice and the break rooms twice, common areas twice. Then probably what I would go in, if I'm going to pitch this to a customer, is to let them know that, hey, I think this is going to take about 6 hours. And here will be the price for that. So what I'm going to price to you is how much time you're going to get from this person. And here's the duties they're going to do during that time. But I would probably try to increase the amount of hours there. And what I would sell them on is just having this person there, maybe with an hour or two of flex in their daily schedule, is going to allow them to handle some other needs as required by the customer. And so it's not a hard bid scenario like you're doing at night where you're trying to guess the amount of hours exactly right. Here, you're selling them on a batch of hours, in this case, 6, 7, 8 hours. And you're saying, I'm going to price you this amount of hours, have a person here for that, and they're going to do such and such work. So that's probably the way I would handle that with a customer. And then to let them know, I think on the front end, that, hey, this is our best guess of what this is going to take. You know, there's travel time between bathrooms, and, you know, there's this amount of density, and you got shifts coming in and out and breaks happening and that sort of thing. But the whole time you're trying to, you know, to figure out what this is, but leave room for some error in that estimate, and maybe even let the customer know that something you guys will have to figure out a little bit together. I think that sort of openness is good and helpful, and I don't think will detract from being able to sell something like this to a customer. And these day porters is a great way to increase revenue at your facilities, and can really shore up a relationship with a customer, because the day porter's there during the day when the customer's there, so it puts a face with the company, and that can be helpful. Okay, next question. Is it possible or advisable to start a facility maintenance division alongside your cleaning company? Is it possible? Yes. Anything's possible. In terms of advisable, that's my inclination. So if I'm just giving an off the cuff answer inclination here, it would be no, that it would not be advisable. But let me maybe back up and give a caveat to that. So as you think about adding really any sort of additional business to your cleaning company, so like another core competency in your organization, one of the questions that you always have to ask is, does this fit well within our business model? And so, for instance, if you guys were doing just janitorial work and day porter work, and you were going to add a carpet cleaning division, well, this really fits pretty seamlessly into the operation, right? So you're going to be using the same kinds of people, the same kinds of staff, you're in the same kinds of buildings. The managers often are going to be able to, the same managers that are overseeing that customer are going to be able to oversee that work, because the work type is similar. So what we have found is that when I have attempted to branch out into some other areas, and we've definitely thought about facility maintenance over the years, and construction, and temp labor. We've looked at a few different options, and even dabbled a little bit in some of them. And what we have found is that the competencies that were required in those other trades were competencies that our existing staff and managers, and even some of our senior level managers, did not have. And so in many ways, what it amounted to is we were starting a brand new company from scratch. And so maybe there is a way to integrate the two. So as I look at companies that have both of those divisions, really what they have is two separate companies. And you're going to have a different group of people managing a maintenance company than you would the people managing the janitorial company. So certainly it can be done, and depending on the caliber of leader that you are, and, you know, can you oversee two different businesses and different objectives in those businesses? Those will be questions that I can't answer for you. But does a facility maintenance division fit well with a cleaning company? Not necessarily. There are large companies, big companies that do it. But if you talk to them or look at their websites, I think it becomes apparent that it's sort of, it appears to be two separate organizations in many ways inside the company. So for most people, I think the answer here is probably no. And I think you'd be better off, you'd be more profitable by trying to expand geographically with your existing company and your existing service model that you have in place. Okay, next question here. So it's a bit of a longer question. So for those of you who have area managers, do they do everything with the customer? No one else needs to be involved most days. Do they also do everything with the employees? Do they post their own recruiting ads and select and hire and fire? Do they manage all project work at the customer level? At the customer location, including hiring the technicians when there's turnover. So the answer to a lot of this is yes, and some of it, the answer is no. So our goal at our company is for the area manager to oversee everything with the customer so that they manage and handle the customer relationship, that they work with the team on site. They're responsible for quality control. They're responsible for profitability. So let's say that an area manager has 15 accounts, and they average, $5K a piece, something like that. And so they got $75,000 in business that they're overseeing in terms of annual revenue. So I want them to treat that like it's their own business. So they have their customers, they have their employees, and the quality of their work that has to get done. So as a general rule, I want them to own that piece of it. So from a day-to-day perspective, the answer to this question is yes, the area managers oversee and run that. Now, as we zoom the lens out a little bit and think about the org chart of the company, there are other people involved with those customers. And for us, it's going to be the branch managers. And branch managers are who the area managers report to. And so those branch managers are involved in some of the larger accounts. So anytime there's key customer meetings, contract negotiations, anytime there's partnership meetings at some of the bigger accounts, the branch manager is going to be involved at those facilities and with those customers. And the branch manager is in the loop and should be in the loop on employee related things. So it's not like our area managers are out there flying solo and just doing their own thing. No, there is structure, there is accountability, there is certain KPIs that we're looking for with those managers. But from a day-to-day standpoint, yes, those managers are handling things with the employees, including disciplinary stuff and even firing. Now, as it relates to hiring and firing and recruiting, what we have done is we have allowed our HR department, or the folks and for a time that was just one person here for us. They are responsible for the recruiting piece of things and even a decent amount of the interviewing and screening candidates. So we've gone back and forth here as to what's the best process for us. Do we let the managers do the final interview and select the person? Do we let HR handle all the screening and select the person and give it to the manager? I don't know that we have nailed down something that is necessarily better than other things, other options there. But I think broadly what I can say is that HR or whoever's helping with recruiting at the company is involved in the hiring process at some level. And part of that's going to depend on the competency of your managers, maybe how you make that decision, and their workload and their volume and the difficulty of recruiting in your area and that sort of thing. I do think managers should always be invested in the recruiting process. So maybe that means they're constantly working their team to see if there are any referrals that can be drummed up. And so I think they need to be in close connection with HR. And in that process, and the same goes when there's a disciplinary issue, I think HR needs to be involved in that. But the area managers are certainly integral to making all of that happen. Okay, next question. What does the France organizational chart look like? So I've had a lot of people ask this question. So let me pop over here to this screen here, and let me stretch this out here. So this is what our organizational structure looks like currently. So So my role here as the CEO, our president is Brian Lewis. So a lot of you guys are familiar with Brian. You've heard him speak or interacted with him. So Brian has been with us for probably 8 years, maybe 9 years. And he essentially oversees all the operations of the company. He's basically the reason that I don't have much of a job here at France currently. And he has 3 direct reports that work under him. And well, kind of 4. That's not necessarily shown on here, but I can mention that here in a minute. So he has our VP, we call it VP of Customer Experience, but this is Jeff Carmen's role. So Jeff oversees the day-to-day operations, like out in the field of getting things done. And then under Jeff, we're in the process of hiring another business development person. So you could argue that Brian should oversee, or the company president should oversee, the sales silo. But because of Jeff's experience in that area, we're letting him oversee that piece. And so we'll have a salesperson, and then we'll have a couple people that are helping out in the sales and marketing department. And then what we have, this isn't exactly the language that we use, but we have multiple regions or branches. We used to call them branches. We've switched to starting to call them regions. But we have a manager that's overseeing the different regions. So one manager per region. That's going to be a geographic area. So it's a different city or a different area in a state. And then they have account managers or area managers that work under them. So it's a pretty flat org chart operationally. You've got the head of ops, you got the different regional managers, and you've got area or account managers that work under them. So pretty flat. There's not a lot of in between, middle management, that sort of thing. And really these regional managers are the head honchos of each particular area. And they too, like the area managers, operate somewhat like a business owner with their own P&L in their areas. So then you have the CFO, which is my mom. And there's a couple other ladies that work under my mom in the finance and office management roles, and Brian does oversee that. It is a little bit, looks odd on paper that one of the owners is reporting to a non-owner, but just functionally within the organization, that really works well for us. And they have a good relationship there. And then the last person in the org chart is Eric, who oversees our human resources department, and he has a couple of folks that work under him. Actually, one currently we lost one, Stacy. A lot of you guys have met Stacy. She was offered a job somewhere else in HR, and it was a fantastic job. She's a single mom, and the pay was just more than she could turn down. So we were happy to see her get that opportunity. So we're looking for another person in that recruiter role for us. So this is a breakdown of what this looks like. It could obviously be extended out and be a little more complex, but just from a bird's eye view, this is what we look like operationally. Okay, next question, and we've got this one and one more, and then I will let you guys bail. So this is from Genesis, who's up, their company's up in Alaska. She said, we're wanting to retain or retrain all of our managers, but can't find much for Spanish-speaking managers. Any advice or resources on this? So I honestly, the lack of training, particularly for managers in our industry, is definitely significant. There literally is just a dearth of content, really management content at all, and specifically Spanish speaking. And I think this applies to the cleaner level too. Like there is just not a lot of good training content out there. So I'll give you guys a couple places that you can go. So I do know that a couple of our folks in the group are some of the owners of the Janitorial store. And I know that they have some content and may have some stuff in Spanish over there. I know one of the owners is Spanish speaking and has a lot of Hispanic employees there, and so they may be producing some content there, and they're, I've heard of another place, but I watched some of their videos and they were super cheesy and terrible. And so yeah, there's a few, like I know Spartan. If you're a Spartan user, they have like an education portal that has some cleaner training videos that they have in Spanish. But as a general rule, there's not much out there. And I know this is a shameless plug for us, but that's part of the reason we started Clean Train U, and Connor's working on that project, is that there just wasn't this content out there for our company, and certainly not for anybody else either. And so we're in the process of making some manager training videos. We have a bunch of safety and cleaner training videos too. I think we produced 8 manager videos, and we're working with a lady who's from Colombia, who lives here in our town. We're going to be working on transcribing those and converting them into Spanish videos as well, really to address this particular question. So if you guys, Genesis, if you guys have the time to invest in this, it's probably something, if I'm in your spot, I'm going to work to create something on my own at my own company. You guys know your needs better than anybody else, and there's probably not anything cookie cutter out there that you're going to find at this point. I know that's labor intensive and that's a pain in the butt, and that's why we're working on Clean Train U to help create a solution for that. But I think that's where things are currently. Let's see here. Had a couple questions come in. Oh, Chris, you'd asked about, back to our org chart, you'd asked about how much revenue does each region manage. Probably somewhere in the, and I'm trying to think how it shows 4 on there, but I think there's actually 5 in reality. And it's going to be anywhere between 3 and 4.5 million, maybe up to $5 million. I think we have one that's going to be, we have one new area that's growing, that's substantially smaller, but we anticipate it to grow. And then the rest of them are going to be north of that $2.5 or $3 million number, and some of them will creep on up north of $5 million. We don't really know what the cap is on that for a regional manager. We have a couple of managers that we feel like could really oversee a significant amount of revenue. So yeah. And let me back up. Tom, you'd asked a question about something that I'd asked earlier at the beginning about sales commission. We pay based on, essentially, we're paying based on the profitability of the job. So budgeted profitability of the job. And it's a one-time commission payout. So they get, let's say the job for us, it's either 2 or 2.5 times profit. So if the job was a $15,000 a month job, and on paper it was budgeted to earn $4,000 a month in revenue, that's going to be, let's just say, a $10,000 payout in commission for that salesperson. So it's a one-time payout, but we divide it up over 6 months. So, and as soon as that first check comes in from the customer, they get their first installment. I think it's 25%, and then it's 15% every month after that until they hit the full 100% of that. So that's how that works for us. And if that doesn't answer your question well, you can post in Basecamp, and I'll attach copies of what that sales commission structure looks like. And Larklin, you'd asked about a good incentive program for area managers and managers. We also, and again, if you'll post in Basecamp, just remind me, and I can load up a form. I've sent it out once or twice before, but we do pay. We have 2 forms of bonus or incentives that we pay managers. One of those is we have 3 different KPIs related to customer satisfaction and turnover and job profitability, and those are weighted. And so if you hit a certain number there, you hit your goal there, there's a certain bonus associated with that, and it gets paid out every quarter. And then they also can make additional income or commission on selling, or it's actually profit sharing on selling extra bill work. So that's what that looks like for them. Okay, last question is, and this is my friend John, who's just up the road in Louisville, was asking a question in Basecamp about how they can lower supplies expense at their company. And he mentioned that, our company was hitting 2%. They seem to be stuck around 5%. And there's a couple other larger companies that commented. Connor Hass, I know you guys, I think you were one of the ones that commented there. You guys are hovering around 2%. A couple other companies are doing the same. So I think the key for that, because we were at 5% for a long time, probably in the 4 to 5% range. And the handful of things that we started doing to push that down is we did join NSA and started getting some more aggressive pricing. So that was one, and we started really leaning on our suppliers on that end, and we really worked that to get the maximum amount. I mean, you're talking, this is a big deal. I mean, 2% total to the bottom line that we were able to save. 2.5% is a significant increase in our net margins, especially as the larger you get as a company. As a $10 million company, that's $200,000 or $250,000 in additional profit, which is huge. So that was the first step that we took. The second thing we did is we started streamlining what we allowed to be used. And so we started looking for the best chemical option that was also cost effective. And then we really limited that to the quantity, like in terms of how many options or varieties we let people use. So when our numbers were much higher in terms of percentage, our managers were using a lot of different stuff. They had liberty to go buy stuff when they needed it. And it became somewhat of a free-for-all. And so we started paring down what we ordered. Like, here's the approved list of what you can get. This is the only stuff you can buy. And that really started saving money for us as well. I'd say those really are the two biggest things. I think there are some people, Mark Patton, you mentioned this about being with NSA, but also having trouble with your suppliers. We did experience some trouble with some of ours and had to make a couple switches. But I think if you really work that program, you could probably shave off 1.5% of your total supply expense. And then from there, I think there's some other efficiencies you can pick up in limiting what it is you're buying and being more careful or more thrifty or Spartan with your ordering process. And I think that will help eliminate some waste in that particular piece of the organization. Chris, you asked about sharing those KPIs. Again, if y'all will post in Basecamp, I'll share the form that shares those KPIs, and I can do the sales commission thing as well. So, all right, guys, hey, that is the end of this. This is all the questions. I appreciate you all being willing to sit in on this with me. I hope this was helpful. If you guys have any other follow-up or need anything from me, any questions that I didn't answer or want further clarification, don't hesitate to reach out to me, Jordan@elitebusinesscoaching.net, and I'm happy to talk with you about any of that stuff. So I hope you have a great rest of the week, and I look forward to connecting with you guys soon. Take care.